What's up everyone, I'm Gushy and welcome to RPG Labs. In this video I'm going to teach you how to be the chonkiest, most tanky, nimble assassin in Elden Ring. With this build we're going to be racking up a ton of bleed while safely getting in and out of danger. Especially against bigger bosses that have slow attacks but really large AoEs. The invincibility frames that we get with this build easily has us dodging in and out, giving us a lot of time just in case we make a mistake. On the flip side, this lets us play super aggressive, dodging big attacks if timed correctly. Of course, because we're using a bleed build, we'll be racking up that bleed meter to eventually get big bursts of bleed damage. So if you're interested in this build, I recommend checking out our Elden Ring playlist as we go over a ton of other builds with all the other classes, some guides, and tips to master Elden Ring. To make this build, there's only 3 main pieces of gear that you really need. The first one, and probably the most important, is the Ash of War Bloodhound step. This is what's letting me phase in and out of combat, giving me all those iframes to dodge attacks. You've already seen in the gameplay how evasive you can be and the distance that it covers for the low cost of some FP. However, there's also other really important tech that we also get with Bloodhound step. One, we actually get a new move, which is a lot faster than our normal running attack. If doing a light attack right out of Bloodhound step, specifically with these claws that I'm using, we can get a light attack that is twice as fast as our normal one. Especially with a bleed build, your priority should be getting as many hits as possible in as little time as possible to build up the enemy's bleed meter. So the faster we can attack, the faster we can fill up the enemy's bleed bar. Now this only works for the first light attack, so the basic game loot that I use, get that really quick light attack, then either dodge out or wait for the enemy's attack to dodge and repeat the process. Because we're using a two-handed weapon, each one of our light attacks will actually get 2 hits, with both hits increasing the bleed meter. Next, let's talk about the second most important thing, which is our weapon. Of course, the weapon we should be using should do a decent amount of bleed damage, and my favorite so far is the Bloodhound claws. Not only does this do crazy blood buildup at 60, but it also automatically comes with Bloodhound step. There's definitely other alternatives like the hook claws, which you can get pretty early on into the game. Just like the Bloodhound claws, this also gives a blood buildup of 60, but it just does a little bit less damage. We can also find the Raptor Talons, which is another good option, but again less damage than the Bloodhound claws. There's definitely other options like this Star Fist, but the blood buildup is only at 45. Or this Winged Scythe, which has a blood buildup of 55, but it is a larger weapon and it swings a lot slower. Now to get those Bloodhound claws, you can find it right here on the map, but you need access to Volcano Manor. So if you don't have these other areas unlocked yet, the other claws may be a really good alternative. Getting to this is fairly simple. All you have to do is spawn at the site of grace over here, go into the hallway and to the first door on the right. There's going to be a hidden path right over here which you have to roll to reveal. Next you're going to go straight until you find some stairs going down, and inside this gated area over here you'll find an enemy which once you kill will drop those Bloodhound claws. Now if you don't have access to this area or you need that Ash of War for Bloodhound step, there's a really easy way to get that. It does drop from a pretty high level enemy, but there is a way to cheese them. The location you want to go is right over here at Lens Rise. Once you get here you're going to have to make sure that it's nighttime for this guy to spawn. When it's nighttime, you'll just ride across to this bridge over here and you'll see the enemy. Next, all you have to do is make sure he's following you and ride up this hill to the right over here. Make sure to jump to avoid all those poison sacks. Once you reach the top of the hill and you see his name disappear, just hang left and he should die immediately. With that, you'll receive the Ash of War Bloodhound step and you should be able to apply it to your other weapons. One thing to keep in mind is that once you go to the site of grace and attempt to change your Ashes of War, there are different affinities that you can use. Currently I have Standard, Keen, Lightning, and Sacred. If you didn't know, what this does is actually change our attribute scaling. So instead of scaling off our Standard Strength and Dexterity, I can select the Sacred affinity, which will have it scaling off our Faith stat. I started out with a Prophet and went for a Faith build, so this was a pretty good option at first. But what I found out was that if you are using a Sacred affinity, scaling off our Faith damage, we cannot add any armaments to our weapons. This means that I can't apply my Blackflame Blade, the Electrify armament, and the most important, the Bloodflame Blade armament. So just keep in mind to either keep it at standard, or what I did was keep it at the Keen affinity, which changed the primary infinity scaling to dexterity all the way up to B. Currently I have a decent amount of dex, so this was the best option for me. Now with this new affinity, you can see that we can again apply our armaments, with the most important one and the third most important part of this kit, which is the bloodflame blade. Bloodflame blade is an incantation that you can use. It does require 12 faith to equip and will stack bleed damage along with the passive perks with our claws. Now if you're not running a faith build, there are other options to get this same effect. There is a consumable item called blood grease, which you can craft with the Nomadic Warriors cookbook, and you'll basically get the same effect. So you really don't have to be a prophet or spec into faith, but it will cost you some crafting materials. Now with these three things, you have a really good setup for a pretty good bleed build, but we can take this a step further and make more use of our bloodhound step. Because bloodhound step is basically a better dodge, and because we're not going to be using our dodge, we're free to equip our maximum load, letting us increase our damage negation and our poise. So we can load up on all this chunky boy armor, get all the benefits, and just lose our dodge. It may take a little time to get used to using your Ash of War instead of your dodge, but as long as we don't go overweight, we won't lose our ability to run and jump as well. If you guys are wondering where I got the armor from, it does drop from this guy, which can respawn, but I honestly don't remember where it was. I think it was in one of those towers where you get the halves of the medallion to get the lift. Now we've gone over all the good things about this build, but I did want to mention the bad things, which is that it does not scale off of your arcane stat. If you do equip an Ash of War with an affinity to arcane, the initial damage of your claws will have an increased damage, but it will still take the same amount of hits, and the bleed explosions still do only a portion of the enemy's health. To test this, I used my regular stats, which I had arcane at only 13. I've tested this with the backstab, as well as the light attacks and the heavy attacks. They still do around the same amount of damage, and in the case with the light attacks, still takes the same amount of hits to get to the full bar of bleed. Then I respect at Renala. You will need a pretty rare material called larval tear, but after this you should be able to respec. I put 50 points into arcane, and again still needed the same amount of hits and did the same amount of damage. I even tried it with the bloodflame blade and still again the same thing. If you guys don't know where to find the larval tear, I found mine right over here at the village of the Albinarics. All you have to do is head up to the hill. When you get to the village, all you have to do is look to the right and find the gravestones. And in the middle, you'll find it right over here. If you guys are wondering about the stats I'm using, I really haven't optimized it yet, as I was going for a faith build. But if I really wanted to optimize, I'd probably go mostly into dex, so the claws will scale with the keen affinity Ash of War. I probably wouldn't go too much into faith or arcane, just enough to use that bloodflame blade, but then also max out mind and vigor, so we could use bloodhound step as much as possible and tank as much damage just in case we do get hit, mostly because we will be up close to the enemy and most likely will get hit. So all this gameplay really is not optimized at all, and it still works pretty well. With that, that's everything you guys need to know about how to make a really awesome bleed build. If you guys have a bleed build that's just as good or even better than this, let me know in the comment section down below. It's really hard to find a lot of fast hitting weapons that can also close the distance, just like the bloodhound step. So I'm really interested to see what you guys have come up with. With that, I'll leave you guys with the gameplay of this bleed build against Renala. As always, thank you guys for watching and hope to catch you in the next one. Peace.